Before I share the agenda, also the slide decks that we are going to present today should be available for everybody who's registered. So if you're interested in that, we will be able to send that material out to you as well. So let me go ahead now and just show my screen momentarily. So here's our agenda for today, and we're going to be fairly fast-paced, and we're going to sort of keep moving along, with a fairly good clip today. So we will have opening prayer in a few moments. Then our bishop will give us a little kickoff introduction at 10 minutes after 9. And then we have the honor of hearing the Reverend Stephanie Johnson. Following that, the team members will give a very short presentation of what we're doing within the diocese regarding CreationCare and what our goals are, how we want to move forward. And then we're going to see some presentations from specific parishes in the diocese. This has got shifted around a little bit. I didn't have a chance to update the agenda in the last 5 minutes, but the order of presentation here is getting moved around a little bit. And then we're going to have a breakout group, and we're just going to discuss what we can do within our own parishes regarding CreationCare and, particular steps we might want to take. We'll have a very short break. Then coming back, we'll have a presentation on plant-based diets, which is a very important contribution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Then we have a presentation from PSE&G on energy audits. And then we've got our West Coast folks joining us, Adrienne Elliott, who will be talking about Sustain Island Home. And I'm sorry, no, getting my names confused. Be talking about the Episcopal Church's CreationCare curriculum. And then Lisa Alteri, she will be talking about Sustain Island Home and our carbon tracker. And then we'll have a wrap up close to noon today. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Barbie to open us up in prayer.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Creator God, in this season of creation, renew in us delight for the earth and resolve to care for all that you have made. We lament the rolling back of climate protections, the assault on public lands, and the neglect of efforts to heal our wounded planet. Transform our grief into faithful action, that your living creation, singing your praise, even as it groans for redemption, may yet flourish. Uphold all who labor and advocate for the care of our common home, through Jesus Christ, in whom all things were created and redeemed. Amen.
Amen.
Scripture tells us that creation waits with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed. Creation is waiting for us to open our eyes to the devastation in our world, to put the needs of the most vulnerable above the greed of the powerful, to move from doing what is easy to doing what is necessary and right, to prioritize the needs of community over the convenience of self. Creation is waiting for us to remove the pollution from our seas, land, air, bodies, and hearts. In all these things and more, creation waits for us to assume our roles as its servants and protectors. With God's help, we will answer creation's call. Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to also offer a land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement is based on the guidelines from the Indigenous Peoples Missioner of the Episcopal Church and General Convention Resolutions 2022 CO22 and 2022 D019. We remember and honor the indigenous people of the world, especially the Lenni Lenape whose land we occupy. The land in this region was their home, which was claimed and taken from them by colonization and forceful removal. We acknowledge and honor descendants of the original inhabitants who remain in the population in the region of the Diocese of New Jersey today. We give thanks for the Lenni Lenape and express our gratitude for their witness of how to live gently on the earth and tend its rich resources honorably and humbly. We must learn from the example of the original people's sacred connection to creation and remember that the earth does not belong to us, but that we belong to the earth and that we are all relatives in life. May this be a pledge to live in right relationship with all people and all of creation, asking for God's help in the process.
All right, thank you, Barbie. I'm looking to see if we have.
The bishop is here. She's labeled as Chris.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I'm
Sorry about that, Bishop.
no worries. I'm grateful for the registration link and figuring all that out. So, um, I am so glad to be here this morning. I think we finished our prayer and land acknowledgement, and I can jump into conversation. Okay. I appreciate both the way this day is framed and that we begin with prayer and a recognition of where we are. It places us firmly in right relationship with God and each other and in connection to the land upon which we are placed and where we live and grow. As many of you know, I was ordained in the Anglican Church of Canada and had the benefit of 4.5 years there before moving to the Episcopal Church, which is very firmly home. We have been in the Episcopal Church since, oh my goodness, more than 20 years now. And I am deeply rooted in our prayer book and our traditions. And for the most part, the traditions and the prayer book and all of the things that make us who we are very similar to the Canadian Church. But the American Church's 1978 prayer book, the red one that's in our pews and we use on Sunday mornings, was revolutionary when it happened. And it led the way around the Anglican Communion for some very interesting thinking and conversations around liturgy and around the work of the people and the ways that we engage with one another. The Anglican Church of Canada did a brand new prayer book based somewhat upon our prayer book. They called it the Book of Alternative Services, and they're still using that as the primary book they use, but in fact it's the alternative book because their prayer book is a little bit older. It's a rather interesting situation. But the reason I share that with you is that in one of our Eucharistic prayers, it's Eucharistic Prayer C, we talk about our relationship with the environment and we talk about how God made us the rulers of creation. Does that line resonate with people? You made us the rulers of creation. The Canadian Church, in one of very few revisions on some of that language, changed that from making us the rulers of creation to the stewards of creation. And that is the one place where I still stumble in our liturgies with the Canadian roots in there, because stewards feels a lot more like who we are actually called to be in our relationship with God and with our world and with one another. Rulers puts us in a place where we might be making bad decisions, and that's just fine because we're in charge. Stewards gives us the gift of sacred responsibility, a sacred trust to care for the world, to care for creation, and to do our best in partnership with God and with God's people to bring forth the good that we can bring forth. There's a long history in our scripture of careful words and invitations for us to consider the right way of being placed on this earth and in relationship with one another, beginning with the stories in the book of Genesis, where we are made in God's image and entrusted with care for God's world. You might remember way back in the stories of the Garden of Eden, we are supposed to take care of the land and till it, and it will produce for us. We are supposed to be in a loving and faithful and careful relationship with the world that God has made. But we have not always, we have not done that particularly well, especially not in the past few hundred years with the Industrial Revolution. It was perhaps a little easier to see that symbiotic relationship when most people were farmers and the connections were strong with the land, and the cycles and rhythms of human life were based on the work on the cycles of the planet and the ways that this fragile earth, our island home, produces for us and shapes us and forms us. And yet, when it comes to the New Testament, we see one of the first places where we recognize that Jesus is in fact God is in seeing his power over creation. Remember the story of the stilling of the storm? That is one of the first places where people can truly recognize that this isn't just a particularly wise teacher or someone gifted with the ability to do miracles in the short term, but someone who has the ability to still the storm, to calm the seas, to make the whole world respond to his call. And I think that is a wonderful way for us to enter into this conversation, to think about the ways that the world is part of, we're placed in the world in a way that invites us as faithful disciples of Jesus to seek the best and to see in the world the power of God in creation and our own call to be faithful and to tend and to steward and to care. We haven't done a great job of this in recent years. And I think the Episcopal Church and other denominations, we're still struggling a little bit to get the theology right. And I think we've moved, it's a bit like the pendulum swings. Sometimes we focus on the theology and we miss the concrete actions. Other times we focus on the actions and we miss the theological reflection. And until we do this work together, we're not going to be able to fully understand the bigger picture and the small details at once. So we might focus on trying to understand what it means to be stewards of creation and miss the fact that the practices of our congregations and communities are day by day causing harm to the world. Or we might focus on making sure we don't print too many papers and getting recycling and stopping single-use plastics, but not reflect too clearly on why we do this, who God has called us to be, and how it might change and shape our very being and our outlook and our way of being present in the world. So we have some work to do to balance the two. Really, it's less about balancing ends of a spectrum and more about finding a place in the middle that allows us to hold both practice and understanding together. And I know that that's a challenge in some of our congregations. I've had folks make comments to me that they're not entirely certain. Climate change seems to be sort of a misnomer, and so much for climate change when it's global warming, when it's this cold out there. And that tells me that we as a church have some work to do at the most basic levels, beyond even our own practices, but in helping to teach and change and shape the world around us. There is also a justice element to this work, and we know that some of the practices that we're asking for cost money. The ways that we encourage congregations to be present, it requires that congregations have access to resources. Our poorest congregations do not have that access in the same way as our wealthier churches do. And the history of racism means that many of the neighborhoods where our historically Black congregations and our congregations of color are placed are neighborhoods and communities that have suffered from the impact of environmental harm and degradation. And so as we do this work around care for creation, it reaches naturally and it must reach into the areas where we are challenged in work of justice. So as we keep this in mind today, it's essential that we not lose sight of the justice aspect of this work. And again, I think that's one of those areas where if we aren't careful, we can talk about one thing and miss two or three or four other important things in the conversation. When we do that, we move forward one step, but we don't set ourselves on a path that allows us to a renewed connection with creation and with one another, which is our deeper call. As congregations, as individuals, and as a diocese, we must be doing this work at this time. I'm grateful to the CreationCare group for putting together today's opportunity to reflect and to learn. I'm grateful to each of our speakers and to the ways that we are offering both the ability to learn some practical aspects to think about how we might live into the work before us, but also to do some bigger picture, putting the puzzle together in a way that I think will help us as a diocese to respond more fully and to understand ourselves a little bit differently and our place in creation. If we do this work together, if we do it even beginning with a smaller group, then we will see it will grow and it will expand, much like we can see the ways that, I've got this plant in my living room that's taking over just a little bit of water, and it's 2 shelves down on the shelf it's on, and it's starting to extend into other spaces, and it is making things better by its very presence. This work I like to think of as just like the plants and the world we are called to tend. This allows us to extend the small threads, the roots and the fruits, the vines that influence the world. And so I'm grateful for what you're doing just in turning up today, for your willingness to engage in the conversation, and for the ways that both the small and the large, the theological and the practical, will work together to help us as a diocese and a denomination and our congregations and ourselves to be more fully present, not as the rulers, but as the stewards of creation. I'd love to hear if folks have thoughts or questions or responses to that, or if it makes sense, or if it where you find yourselves in the work of caring for and being faithful to the creation around us.
Bishop, thanks for that sharing about rulers versus stewards. I think that's something that I think we need to continue to think about and be mindful of, because language means something, and the words we choose are important. So I will definitely take that with me as I reflect on our engagement in terms of CreationCare. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And Mr. Dean, if you'd care to change when you're using that Eucharistic prayer, if you slip stewards in instead of rulers,
Okay.
that's a liturgy change I'd be happy to support. But
Okay, Bishop.
it really does matter. And
Yeah.
and one of the best ways that Episcopalians learn theology is actually through our liturgy and our prayer books. So if we could slip out words that put us in one type of relationship and replace them with words that put us in another, it makes a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here bright and early on a Saturday.
Thank you, Bishop. Really appreciate that. And I know you have a busy schedule today, and I appreciate you making time for us. It was very important message that you gave us today.
Thanks. I'm going to try and stay for some of the conversation, but I have to slip away. We have several other diocesan days happening at this time. So I'm here for a little bit, but I'll disappear at some point.
All right. Thank you. So the Reverend Stephanie Johnson is on the schedule next.
Good morning, and thank you, Bishop, for all of that. You'll see that my slides do have some of those points too, so I'm glad we're so in sync here for the conversation. And in honor of New Jersey, I have my Bruce Springsteen coffee mug to start the day. You'll notice it's a big one because it's an early morning start for me and all of you. So I'm hoping cheers to Bruce and cheers to New Jersey. So there you go. Let me get my slideshow up here. There's just 6 slides, and I've going to do my best to honor your time and get through about 10 minutes and hopefully have some robust conversation. So what I'm going to talk about is the theological touchstones for this ministry that you're all engaged in or thinking about being engaged in. Let's see. Here we go. Can you all see that? Great. And the reason, Bishop said it so well, and I just want to reiterate, so often when you're doing this work, people are like, well, this is too political. This is not the church's work to do creation care or justice work. This is not what we should be doing. Or years ago, I used to hear, well, this is paganism. We're worshiping creation and we're not worshiping God. And there's all of these sort of barriers that people set up and resistance. And so I don't know if you've experienced resistance in your congregation or within conversations with folks. But the reality is we are deeply steeped in these concepts of caring for God's creation, loving God's creation, and injustice, as the bishop already mentioned. So my hope is that these 5, 6 points that I'm going to give you are going to inspire you, give you some ways to respond to people who may be resistant, but also give you hope to sustain your ministry, that this isn't just a to-do list, which often happens. The recycling, the styrofoam, the solar panels, it feels sometimes like you're just doing things and you're not always able to ground it into the theology of why we're doing it. And so as a little fun exercise to start, if you all have your chat there, I would like you to, let's see, do a brainstorming activity. You can do this in your congregation if you're launching, or if you just want to reinvigorate your group to do stuff and say, where are the stories and parables? Where are the words that reflect our relationship with creation? Bishop already mentioned some wonderful stories in Genesis, but I could say the mustard seed. So put in the chat there, the parable of the sower. Any ideas? It just sort of makes you remind you that there is no eco-theology in the Bible, because the Bible is about the environment and walking in God's creation and living in God's creation and realizing the harvest is important. And all of those themes and concepts are so key and central to the Bible, from Genesis, which starts in the creation story in the Garden of Eden and the rivers, and to Revelation that ends in the tree of life and the healing of the nations with the leaves. In the tree of life and the river that runs through it. And in between, we hear all sorts of things about God's creation and honoring and respecting it. And think about it for another way in another minute. How often was Jesus inside buildings when he was preaching and teaching and healing? Very few times, right? I mean, most of the stories we hear, he's on the seashore, he's on the mountaintops, he's walking. I mean, people of that time were steeped in the cycle of life, which we've lost. And that's part of why we have this crisis, I think. And so I want to invite you to think about the awe and wonder and gratitude for God's creation. This beautiful quote from Dostoevsky that says, if you love God's creation, if you experience it, you wonder, you'll have the mystery of it, and you'll be inspired and hopeful, even as destruction happens. This preaches really well. This teaches really well. Think about how many people in the world say, oh, I'm not spiritual, but I find God only in creation. I only experience God in nature. You might have a landscape of your heart. I do. I have a landscape that when I go to in my mind and my soul for deep prayer and to reconnect with God. The awe and wonder and gratitude for God's creation could be so inspirational in the congregation, including worshiping outside and being out in nature for that experience and that reminder of who we are and grounding our feet in the earth and God's creation. So it's a simple way to invite people in, a simple way for you to find inspiration to continue your ministry. This is what the bishop talked about, and I put the same exact quote in there, right there. We must have been sympathetic, right? We were thinking the same lines. Care of creation and stewardship. There's this responsibility to God that people fear, because God has entrusted us for taking care. And I do actually change out the word in Eucharistic prayer, so don't tell my bishop in Connecticut about that, but they know. So we become stewards of creation. We become people who feel, because God loves us so much, we want to be responsible for that which God has created. And so we're inspired, we're motivated. We're doing this as a real sense that God has called us to this work. Now, the one beautiful thing and the one challenging thing about stewardship is sometimes it places us at the center of God's creation, and we forget about all the other creatures. We sometimes we might forget that God loves the mountains and the trees and the hills and all the creepy crawly things that have been created. And so this concept of stewardship is beautiful because it gives us an opportunity to be responsible for what God loves. It also helps us to think about the future. Like, what are we leaving? Stewardship is the idea of we're taking care for future generations. And that can give us hope. I mean, I often say I do a lot of my work for my children and my children's children. Not that I have grandchildren yet, but I do this ministry because I don't want to look back in my life and say, I haven't tried to help future generations for God's sake. And so this concept that so many of you have care of creation teams and you do stewardship teams is looking forward, but also looking inward about what God has called us to do. And the idea of that, as I mentioned, the idea of stewardship centers us in creation, whereas God's creation is much more vast, and that we're have an opportunity to explore it more broadly when we think about it, again, as the bishop mentioned, in justice. That it's not just about stewardship, but it's loving all our neighbors. And I love this quote from Matthew 16:15. You know, Jesus sends them out to proclaim the good news to all creation. It's not just to it's a statement that gets often underappreciated, I think. It's all of creation hears the good news of Jesus Christ, the possibility of redemption and renewal and resurrection and new life. And it's not singularly about humanity, it's about all of what God has created. So loving our neighbors is expanded to think of our neighbors as all beings, all things that exist in the world and have been created by God. Now you can look at loving your neighbors as a different way. I mean, there's two ways of loving our neighbor, right? Those are the people, we could be people who we don't know, who we may never meet, who have been impacted by decisions that that destroy their communities, local environmental degradation, climate change for the people all over the world who are devastated by rising waters, by forest fires, and even in our nation and in our own communities, and in New Jersey too, forest fires. And so there's this whole thing that we need to consider about justice. And we also invited to consider about environmental racism. What does it look like to love our neighbor who we'll never meet? And how do we advocate in the world faithfully? Not because we need to, but because we're called to seek justice for all people. And we need to do it, but but more as a returning the love of all neighbors for those people we'll never get to know. And those people will never get to meet, but advocacy and justice for all creation. This is one that we don't do a lot about in the Episcopal Church. That weird sin might make us cringe a bit. It's not a thing that we particularly talk about, but the House of Bishops in 2022 specifically said ecological sin is our turning away from God. And the phrase came into being in 1997, I think, from the Greek Orthodox patriarch Bartholomew, who started talking about the devastation of the world and loss of biodiversity is called our sinful nature. We have made decisions about consumption. We have made decisions about how we live our lives. We've made decisions about supporting greed and all sorts of things that separate us from God and God's creation, and then at the same time destroys God's creation. So this is a hard one to preach or teach, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that sinful behavior has brought us in many ways to where we are in this world. And I love this prayer from the Enriching Our Worship, that the evil done on our behalf. We are, because we are human beings in this world, are complicit in the impacts of climate change and the impacts of degradation, of biodiversity loss and local environmental degradation. So we are part of the system because we live, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be mindful of it. I'm also often think about a story I heard about the Quakers, who were strong abolitionists, And they were trying to find a way to step away from their complicit behavior in slave trade in the 1840s. And so they decided to use nothing that involved cotton as one of their statements of fact of sort of living without complicitly in the system, an economic system that oppressed. And it's not the same for ecological sin, but I'm mindful of ways that we can choose. And that's where some of personal decisions can play into how you live into those experiences. I'm rolling along here because I don't have much more time and I know the clock is ticking. So please bear with me. Big ideas. Living and acting with hope for all creation. We are people of hope, even if we despair. We're not optimists necessarily. I wouldn't call myself a big optimist, but I am hopeful in Jesus Christ. And this question from the Catechism in our prayer book is: we live in confidence in the fullness of life and the completion of God's purpose for the world. It clearly says to me, and maybe it says to you, this is about environmental action, environmental ministry, all of these things that you're interested in as a community. We live in hope. We continue the work, even when sometimes it's discouraging and maybe when we get tired. But Christian hope invites us and compels us forward to consider that God has never left, and God's plan for the world and purpose for the world continues, and we are part of that conversation. We are not responsible for it, nor will we fulfill or complete God's plan for the earth. We can contribute in positive ways. And I want to point out the Jeremiah quote. Jeremiah, if you remember, before he was sent into exile in Babylon, never knowing if he was going to come back, never knowing if he was going to show back up in the Holy Land in Israel, bought a plot of land publicly with a sign of hope that someday someone would till that land. And so he went out in the public sphere, public world, and claimed ownership of property that he might never see again. And that's just another way of seeing hope, claiming ownership in redemption and resurrection and new life that we may never experience, but we do for God's sake. And so my final slide is, this could be a 5-hour conversation amongst us all. What about renewal, restoration, and resurrection? How much we could talk about how we are called to be part of that restoration and renewal, and how that Jesus's resurrection is so important to the promise of new life in all that we do. So that usually takes me like 40 minutes, and then we have a half-hour conversation. So I know it's a lot. The bishop framed it better than I could have and set up all those points, but I just want to leave it there. I don't know if we have any time for questions.
Thank you, Mother Stephanie.
It's a lot.
Just so wonderful. Yeah, we do have time for questions. I think our schedule can be a little flexible here, but I really want to thank you for building on the bishop's message with your theological grounding in all efforts to save God's good creation. And everyone, Stephanie's slides will be available. And Stephanie, would you please mention your little book?
Right. Yeah.
Great little. I was trying to find it, but you can do better.
That's okay. So Church Publishing asked me to write really a little primer on this, and it's called "How Can I Care for Creation?" And that's what it is. Very basic. There's a chapter on theological touchstones, and it's 80 pages, and it's got questions in each chapter. But what I'm really excited about the book is at the very end there's a retreat you can do in your congregation. It's all set out, half day or full day, about how you can engage your congregation and start off your program or expand your program or reinvigorate it with a retreat, a mini retreat on care of creation and stewardship. So it's very, very basic, and it tells a little bit about the history of the Episcopal Church's engagement. There's a whole chapter on that in this ministry.
Thank you. And for those of you at the cathedral, I can see a few faces here. We do have a copy of that book on our CreationCare table. So please feel free, but better still, go ahead and order your own copy. So, but thank you again, Stephanie. Very, very impactful talk. I think at this point we are going to move on to have a little presentation about what we're doing in the diocese with our CreationCare team. And we're just beginning, and we're beginning our efforts here. So, don't judge us too harshly as you see. And, somewhere along the line, as the bishop said, we do need to find this balance between our theological approach and our practical approach. So, right now that full balance may not be entirely in place, but that's where we're striving. So I'm going to kick off and talk a little bit about that. Then Bobby's going to talk about the bigger picture and her work that she's done with the Episcopal Church and General Convention. And then we're going to move to Grace Longo, and she will be talking about her work that she has done in other parishes before she moved to our diocese, and how that projects into what we can do in our own individual parishes. All right, so Diocese of New Jersey CreationCare team, my biggest message today is that we want to build our team. We want to make it bigger. We want to expand what we're doing. There's 3 of us right now. We'd like to have a dozen or more people on this team. So I'm hopeful maybe at least a few people on this call will be interested in talking to us. But as I said before, we've got Canon Bobby back from St. Paul's, Westfield, Grace Longo, Grace Judge Haddonfield, and myself from Trinity Cathedral. We do have a nice website. If I have time, I'll jump to that later on. But when you get this slide deck, and also I'll put it in chat in a moment, I do really encourage you to go to this Diocese of New Jersey CreationCare website. It's being put together nicely. It may go through other iterations going forward, but it's very usable at the moment. But on that website is our mission statement, and kind of gives us our raison d'etre. And without going through the whole statement, it really breaks down into 4 different elements. And one is what we just said already, that we do have a responsibility to be active stewards of God's creation as people of faith. And we have this, basically environmental stewardship is part of this reconnection to make ourselves whole again, reconnecting with God's world. And part of that is, part of our mission here is to have these sort of educational and awareness efforts, and really encouraging people to take a small step, not a huge step necessarily in one go, but begin the process, small steps, and encourage others to do the same, to move the needle a little bit. And eventually, as the bishop alluded to, we will reach a tipping point, I think, in our society in general, when it will become the norm. We do strive to be a resource for CreationCare material. If you go to the website, kind of stuff on there. And as I said, we're really looking to network with other parishes. We want to bring other parishes together that are already in the CreationCare ministry, and really, put our heads together and learn from each other. 1 + 1 = 3. Be careful on time here, but what we've done so far, we've tried to get word out about what we're doing. We've had articles in or at least 1 article in Good News in the Garden State newsletters. We're doing this forum. We're developing a mailing list. We're networking. We're starting to network already with other parishes. We want to continue doing that. We're encouraging people to take the Blessed Tomorrow Eco America Climate Ambassador Training, which is a very helpful educational experiences, and it teaches you how to talk about climate change in a faith-based community. We're working on the diocesan resolution. As the bishop mentioned too, like the practical side of this, we're trying to do some practical steps, and one of those is to reduce single-use plastics. Bobby's planning a nature walk. We had a farm sanctuary visit planned, but we didn't get enough people to sign up. So we're gonna have another effort on that. We've been promoting the use of season of creation liturgies. We'll be using some of that tomorrow at the cathedral. And I've already mentioned the CreationCare page. Maybe actually, I haven't got that queued up right now. So, please do go ahead, and maybe I can just have time to quickly copy it. Maybe not. Maybe that's not going to work. So I'm going to leave it at that for now and actually pass it on to Barbie. So let me just stop sharing. Or perhaps before I do that, are there any questions on anything you just heard about the activities that we're already engaged in the diocese? Any questions or comments? All right, so I think while Barbie and Grace are talking, I'll pull up that webpage, so at the end I'll try and show it to you then. So with that, I will hand it over to Barbie, who's going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture in the Episcopal Church. All right, over to you, Barbie.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And we understand that this work is not just about sitting in meetings, and we aren't getting a lot done just sitting in meetings, and we do want to get out in nature and just be grounded in what we are preserving. And so we are planning a nature walk with a I serve on the Conservancy Council of the Nature Conservancy of New Jersey, and one of my colleagues is a really great naturalist, and he's willing to lead our nature walk. We're also going to have an opportunity to get out on the beach, and not necessarily do one of those planned cleanups, but just enjoying the power of the ocean and taking care of any litter that we find. By training, I'm a geologist, and I was a paleontologist in a previous life, and I like to take people fossil collecting. So sign up if you ever. Anyway, we're not going to just be sitting in boring meetings all the time. How can we? What are we doing? So as a geologist, I had the joy of spending 6 consecutive summers in the field, out in nature, and then also having really great jobs in geology and environmental work. So my first job was, don't get mad, I worked for Big Oil in Houston, and the evil empire, but I did not find any petrocarbons. Yay. So they put me on projects, special projects of geochemical remote sensing, and then I became a systems analyst. And then I worked for the U.S. Geological Survey, mapping sand and gravel deposits. And then I had the best job ever, which was as an environmental scientist for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C., and as a policy and Superfund manager and congressional liaison. So, so with all that sciencey stuff, and as a lifelong Episcopalian, I put it all together and found a place where I could put a little energy in policy and governance and supporting the efforts of environmental stewardship and care for this earth. And I found the connection with the presiding bishop's staff, who were providing just great resources for anybody who wanted to work either, on the legislative side. So I got to serve on, I went to several general conventions as a deputy, and I served on legislative committees. The most recent one was, I'll remember what it was called. It was called Environmental Stewardship and Care of Creation, which was kind of weird. I served on the interim body task force, Care of Creation and Environmental Racism, which was a better label. And then also I was a member of the delegation representing the presiding bishop at COP26 in 2021 and in COP20 in Glasgow and in COP28 in 2023 in Dubai. And if you don't know what COP is, it is the annual United Nations Global Climate Conference and Conference of the Parties, and that's where you get COP, COP, for developing climate accords in negotiations with 197 parties. Those are 197 countries. And since the historic Paris Climate Accord in 2015, the presiding bishop's delegates have really been influential in providing a strong position of the Episcopal Church and trying to persuade the world in the direction of not caring about yourself, but thinking about the world and where our position as one of the worst polluters in the world and one of the least committed to changing and correcting is really impacting vulnerable island nations who are sinking, where that is the ocean is rising. Their fisheries are becoming the chemical changes to their fisheries are drying up, and they're the most vulnerable of all. So everything that we do, I mean, this is what I learned at COP for one. Some of the take-home messages that everything that we do impacts people all over the world. The decision to drive a gas-powered vehicle or an electric vehicle impacts people around the world. The decision to buy a second refrigerator to put in your garage so that you have extra space impacts people on the other side of the world. So I know Grace is going to talk about the steps that we can take, particularly in our parishes, to make those changes. Let's see. So Stephanie and I served on the interim body task force, which for care of creation and environmental racism. And the task force had been renewed 11 times because the task force as an interim body is only supposed to serve between the general conventions. They provide the preparation for general convention and legislation. And it was renewed 11 times. So one thing is if we mean it, we should make that a standing commission. However, in this at this time, the move is to reduce the number of committees at the Episcopal Church level and to kind of make the whole operations leaner and to move operations that were held in the Episcopal Church level to the diocese. So this is where we become more important yet and where the work must be carried on. The Episcopal Church did you know the Episcopal Church has 3 pillars of priority that hold up the Episcopal Church? One of them is CreationCare. Do you know the other 2? The other 2 are racial reconciliation and evangelism. But CreationCare is such a justice issue that it really does, all of those pillars intersect. And we really believe that as a pillar and a priority, all the resources are there for us to share, for us to work together, and that's where some of our groups are going. So I mentioned go to General Convention. I'm one of the founding members of the Green Caucus, which are the Green deputies. We are working hard. We meet monthly. We network. We share events that are going around the country, and we are working on a nice project that the task force had started, which is CreationCare Compline, which was offered to the entire Episcopal Church, supported by the presiding bishop's office. And it's CreationCare Compline. It's monthly. On the first, it's going to be, so that CreationCare Compline started by the task force for that Stephanie was the leader of. That ended at General Convention in 2024. But the Green Caucus has revived it and will be offering CreationCare Compline the first Monday of every month. And the first one will be October 6th. October 6th, which to coincide with St. Francis Day. There will be more information about that on our website.
I think Father Ben Madison may be on a bit of a time crunch too, Barbie. So we might need to move on a little bit, but thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Let me, I haven't had a chance to talk to Father Ben directly, but no, he's one of our speakers and he's at a conference right now, I think, and he's trying to fit this in between spaces. Go ahead, Grace. Why don't you go ahead and move on to you, please.
Okay. Okay, so I'm Grace Longo. I have been working in the Episcopal Church for 12 years, actually in Fifth Avenue, and then we moved down to 34th. I've been doing CreationCare for 4 years, 1 year in the Diocese of New Jersey. This is definitely my passion, and I know everyone else is passionate about this topic, but I wanted to start with this brand new survey that just came out, I think Thursday, that shows that Americans also are passionate about this topic. And even though our country seems very divided, 88% of Americans agree that we have a moral responsibility to create a safe and healthy climate for ourselves and our children. And when you look at it, even politically speaking, this is an interesting thing that down here, if you can see it, Democrats are 95 and Republicans are 86%. This is a national issue, and it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. And if you look at the next slide, this one was done in 2021, so just a few years ago. But look at where, I mean, nationally, it was similar. We were at 85% that we agree that it's a moral responsibility. Even that has risen. But what's really changed is the Republican view. And these are not politicians, these are people. So more and more people are on board with feeling that it is our moral responsibility. Where else could we do this better than in a church, right? In our congregations. What struck me really interestingly is this particular slide, and I'm not really a stat person, but this was done last year. And when they asked about how concerned they were, and I think this has probably risen even more, but it was 71%. But what was striking was when they asked, how do you think your neighbors feel on how concerned they are about climate? And then it drops to 58%. So there's a big gap, but there's this perception that somehow I might be the only one who feels this way. And it creates a certain isolationism This topic, just in general, with all the studies that I've read, is an overwhelming one. People feel depressed because they just don't know what to do and how to go about it. So doing things in a church setting gives these people agency, right? So what I might be doing as an individual, even though I'm going to coin this phrase, small is the new big. Every action has an impact. So Catherine Cahill is a famous scientist, and I believe she's also a theologian. She wrote a book and she talked about the best way to start any kind of programming is to have a discussion. People are feeling incredible anxiety about climate. There's fear. There are people facing health issues due to climate. So just having a discussion in church about how people feeling about all these weather incidents. And if they haven't experienced it themselves, they know somebody who's experienced some event. I mean, myself, just 2 years ago, my basement flooded for a solid week, just kept coming up. So I think we all have some experience with it. So having a discussion is important. Making some kind of public commitment or statement. Eco America has great signage that is incredibly cheap. It's called One Home, One Future. You can, make your own sign just to let the public know that you are talking about CreationCare. Start with visible, easy changes, okay? Again, small is the new big. What if you asked everyone to bring their own coffee cup to coffee hour instead of using whatever type of utensils you're using that go in the garbage? Maybe LED lighting. Maybe you do some sort of fundraiser to change one light bulb a month. I know they're expensive, but a LED light lasts 15,000 hours. So even though it may cost $5 a bulb, but you won't have to replace it, it also uses less energy. Using a carbon tracker, right? We want our parishioners to get involved. So we want to bring people into our moral responsibility to change things. Have people from the congregation or outside the congregation to come and do teaching, composting, planting pollinators and native plants. These are all, again, small things, but can start the conversation going and get commitment. The other thing is making a disaster plan. I know that sounds really depressing, but I know that there are some communities, some churches here that are in flood zones, and having some sort of disaster plan helps get the community feeling safe. And of course, working across the aisle and outside of our churches to work with others. So this is all about getting our parishioners involved. What can the church do about their buildings, right? We may be feeling a sense of overwhelm as well. What do we really do to help our own churches with the increasing cost of energy? This guide comes from Eco America. I am I guess I'm an ambassador, a climate ambassador, that I can do talks about, and I would be using a Blessed Tomorrow talk. I am happy to go to any church. It doesn't matter how small or big the audience is. I'm happy to talk about this. But this guide gives you a step-by-step plan with worksheets and all kinds of things. Later, we're going to be hearing from Kelvin, who represents energy auditing company, and they can help you go through this. But first, we have to track track what we are already spending to make a plan. We can't move forward if we don't know where we are. These are all the different contacts. That's my contact information. Blessed Tomorrow, EcoAmera. These are fabulous organizations. They have tons of research for us to use. I'll put that forward guide into the chat after I'm done. Thanks. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Grace. So that's a great segue, interjection, setup for our next section. And after that, we will take a break. We'll have a short breakout group, and then we'll take a break. Because we've been going at it an hour already. I'm going to move the order of the schedule around a little bit. Father Ben Madison from Holy Trinity Winona is at a conference right now. He's a little bit short of time. He's in a break. So he has a few minutes to talk to us. So I'm going to let Father Ben go first to talk about what's going on at Holy Trinity Winona. So Father Ben has a pseudonym here, Bobby back again. But
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. Thank you for fitting me in. My wife and I are at a foster and adoption retreat for foster and adoptive parents. So we're glad to take a few minutes to be with you. So much of what has already been said resonates with me significantly. Really, at the beginning, when Holy Trinity started sort of looking at how could we green our space a little more, I will admit to all of you that I'm not a climate denier, but it's not on the top of the list of things that I think about on a regular basis, right? I mean, kids, family, church, all these things. And our electric company came to us and said, hey, for 20% of what it costs, we will replace all of the light bulbs and air conditioning units in your church. And first thing I thought was dollar signs, right? Because the amount of money we have to spend on electricity and gas and all of these things. And the second thing I thought was, this seems like a scam, right? Like, why would they be giving this to us for free? Or basically for free. And essentially what they did is they replaced every single light in our entire building, inside and out, in the sanctuary, in all of the rooms and classrooms. And they replaced both of our old air conditioning units for new, more eco-friendly ones. And it worked, and they did it. And it significantly reduced our electricity burden. It was an upgrade for the church. And what I think is most interesting, and the thing that it meant the most to me, is as someone who hadn't really thought about or engaged in sort of a creation care mindset, it opened the door in a way that is non-confrontational, right? Like, you know, it's a trope at this point that we live in a divided time and people have different opinions about things, etc., right? But starting from a place that says, you can save money and this is easy, is actually a really easy way to begin a conversation about what it means to be stewards of creation. How can we further engage in caring and being good stewards of our church and our environment and all of these things? And I think it's especially important to me. So we did this in 2017. In talking to Grace, I found out, I guess we were one of the first churches to do it. And really, I just lucked into it because they came to me and asked if they could do it. In 2021, my town was hit by a tornado in New Jersey, right? We lived in Texas for a few years. I'm familiar with tornadoes, but as a native New Jerseyan, the idea that a tornado would suddenly show up here is mind-boggling to me, right? Like, that is not something we ever had to worry about. And now, as climate change affects things, we do, right? So I think that there are ways, and like one of the things that this program that our electric company offered to us did, is it allows for ways to enter into conversation that don't start immediately with hot button issues, but can be a way to, one, benefit the church, update utilities, do all of these things, and to enter into that space and say, you know, we have been, like, God did make us stewards. Being children of God in this world means that we don't just love our neighbor and love God, but we love the creation that God has made. So how can we be better stewards of it? Our church is currently working on getting a group together for like grounds maintenance and whatnot. And I think there's a composting component that they're interested in. It's just it's a good segue into this larger conversation about how do we be good stewards of what we have, right? Yeah. Do you want any questions, Chris, or anything else?
Well, I'll open that up for questions or comments, but thank you. I really, really like what you said. I'm really listening about starting from a non-controversial, point of view. People who know me at the cathedral know that one of my big things, like even before I was really into the bigger landscape of CreationCare is vegetarianism. And that's something I push all the time, every opportunity at the cathedral. And it is a controversial issue, and but I really like what you're saying is take something, coming back to CreationCare, it's a dollar and cents issue that everybody can get behind. And it's also a CreationCare environmental stewardship issue at the same time. I really like that. Thank you.
I mean, I was blown away this summer. We're working on getting air conditioning for the other half of our building, and we had these really old window units, and like they worked and they were loud, but it was expensive to change them, kind of a lot of work. And this summer we had to do it for one reason or another. And at the end of summer, these AC units must have been 15, maybe 20 years old. I got new ones off of online that cost me under $1,000 for the two of them. And it cut our summer electric air conditioning bill almost in 2/3 because of how much better the modern technology is than the 20-year-old ones.
Right.
So like there's that economic component, I think, is really helpful because people can see the value immediately. But then I think it can also be a good way to talk about environmental justice, right? Like there are Superfund sites all around us in South Jersey, and it should not surprise us that they have that historic communities of color have been built on these Superfund sites, right? Like there are things that we should be doing and ways that we can talk about these things to get into meatier, heavier justice issues. And we can start by saying, well, look, it'll make things cheaper, right? And like who doesn't love that?
Right. Exactly.
Which power company do you use that you're talking about?
We have a Atlantic City Electric.
Okay. We do have a contact there for anybody else who's in that that uses Atlantic City. So,
and I believe they have expanded it too. When we first did it, there was no solar component, and I believe they might have a solar component now as well. Our eaves are too extreme on our church, so like we're not a great candidate for it. But other churches might be.
Hey everyone. Just wanted to hop in. My name is Alex. I'm one of the outreach managers from Atlantic City Electric. And if anyone has any interest or wants to know more about this program, I'm more than happy to hop on a call and walk through how your facility or your church could be a good fit for the program. And we also offer completely free energy assessments. So I put my information in the chat. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story as well.
I also haven't changed a light bulb in the church in almost 8 years. So
yeah, we did the same thing at the cathedral too. When Ellen Rye, of blessed memory, she ushered an energy audit, and you did the same thing. And this year, and Ben, you're right. It's from a practical sense. Even the electric lights in our parking lot, we had to upgrade them, and it was difficult. You had to get the special machinery, and you had to be able to find the 3,500 to do that. But in the long term, it makes sense because we were paying all this amount of money for parking lot electricity that was outdated, costly, and impractical to use. So there's that aspect of it as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. Really appreciate you taking time. I think 10:15 you have to be back on your. So,
Yep.
thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye for now. We will move on. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about what's going on at the cathedral and what we've been doing. Dean John has, already mentioned a couple of things already, but even before I do that, I am just going to share the CreationCare website that I didn't have queued up earlier. So hopefully you can see that. So here it is real quick. All these buttons down the right-hand side on the Pray, Learn, Act, and Advocate, these are all actually hot links. So any of these will take you to another resource. House of Bishops is a great resource for different liturgical, environmental liturgies. We've got New Zealand prayer books, Season of Creation liturgies, seasonofcreation.org. Other things down here. Some EPA websites are still up. Some of the EPA websites have come down. Some of them are still up. I believe as of a couple of weeks ago, these are still all active. Other things we can do down here. There's we've created some material saying, try this in your parish, and it relates already to, what Grace and others have said, and then different ways to advocate. We got our different events going on. Here's our forum, and when we have material on some of the other events coming up, they'll be on here too. All right, so I just wanted to show you that. And the address is pretty easy, diocesenewjersey.org/justice. It's under ministries, as you go justice and then CreationCare, and it's right there, so pretty easy to get to. All right, let me show again this one. Okay, so this is what we're doing at the cathedral right now. I'll just go through this real quick. So we have sort of 8 to 10 active members. We have a bigger email list, but like 8 to 10 people who show up for the meetings. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. In the present form, we had an earlier group, as the dean said, led by Ellen Rye, who has sadly passed on. And so this is a sort of revamping of the group that we started in 2023. We do have, we're very strict on having our monthly meetings. We've got one coming up next week, and at each meeting, we're coming up with new ideas and progressing things forward. We've got 2 permanent CreationCare displays, one in the nave, one in Synod Hall at the cathedral. We do monthly articles every month. We have something in the cathedral newsletter. We've created this kind of like little bifold flyer that people can take away, and this QR code links to different resources in there as well. We've done a couple of in-person forums. We do special things for Earth Day. Talking about vegetarianism, we did a very successful vegan lunch after our coffee hour. I was shocked how well that went down, because I wasn't quite sure how much food to get. So I got, maybe for I think like 50 to 70 people, something like that. All the food was gone in like 20 minutes. Everybody just dived in and at the vegan lunch, and it was really good. So I was very pleased with that. And we do, we really get the word out on the theological side in our preaching as well. And there'll be, tomorrow will be a CreationCare sermon. What we've done, action-wise, we've changed out our janitorial supplies to more eco-friendly supplies. And this is kind of like an ongoing process, but it seems to be working quite well, particularly cleaners. We use like alternatives to bleach and floor cleaners and this type of thing. And you just have to get out there, search the web. You can do it almost with no cost increase if you search carefully and get the right materials. We have reduced single-use plastics and generally what goes into the landfill. We're using ceramic washable stuff coffee hour, done a pretty decent job improving recycling. As the dean already said, we did an energy audit a few years ago. On the advocacy and justice side, we have got a grant with ECSNJ to do actually a plant-based cooking class. And this has been running since March and will run through to the end of the year. And this is really for Trenton residents, and it's to give them a chance to, expose them to the concept of plant-based diets. And it's done in a way that the chef who operates it does it in a way that's affordable and practical, and a way that people can take this home and cook plant-based diets at home with materials that are easily available in the Trenton area. So it's a very good way of just kind of taking a practical step to help people move in that direction, and that's been a pretty good program that's still ongoing through the end of the year. And as I said, we've been using CreationCare liturgies. So just to finish off, these are some pictures. This is a picture of the plant-based cooking class at the cathedral. We've got great participation. We've got as many people as we can fit in the kitchen, basically. So we need a bigger kitchen if you want to do more. That's been a really good program. Here's one of our Earth Day displays. Like 2024, I think the Earth Day theme was on plastic alternatives, and so we did a whole table display on that. We've got a really nice children's zine, which is great for I've given it to my granddaughter. She's 10 years old, but and it's great even for adult reading, actually. But probably any kid who could read would get something out of this. And then here's a couple of examples of our monthly newsletters that we put out. There's one on recycling, one on using native plants, the importance of having native plants. But every month there's something different going in. So that's what we've been doing at the cathedral. And we're working in, there's a little bit of crossover here. Bobby Back attends our meetings. So she's effectively on both committees, if you like. I'm on both committees. And so there's a little bit of sort of crossover between the diocesan team and the cathedral team, and we're sort of learning from each other as we're moving along. So any questions and comments on that before we move on to Mother Ellen?
Okay, I'm going to share with you our experience of using the National Church curriculum on CreationCare. So can I share my screen? And I see that we're going to hear about this in depth later. But I had done the Blessed Tomorrow training last year, and then I was part of a group with the Third Order Franciscans that studied this course. And so when I began with Enspil and Sweetsboro, I asked them if they would like to use this. So this is on the National Church website. It's free. You register and you get a code, so you have access to all the resources. And the resources are terrific. There are lots of films, lots of videos, some articles. There is a lot of homework, but it's very good homework. And people were willing to do that. So it comes in 9 units. Let me switch around to something that has more resources in it. So like this one has a film, and then another something from the UN, and then something from the Catholic movement, Laudato Si. And so we had a really good experience with this. We combined 2 congregations to do it by Zoom. So Pennsville and Sweetsboro did it together. I don't want to exaggerate. There were 8 or 9 people in the class, but both groups were signed on, as it were. They said in their evaluation, their experience was that they were more aware of climate issues. So when they hear the news or when they think about their at-home economy, they think about climate when they make those choices. So in that way, it was very good about raising awareness. I think that that's the most, and there was great conversation about the partners, lots of discussions. It was very fruitful in that way. So, thank you. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Well, we've looked at the curriculum, and to my regret, we haven't picked it up yet at the cathedral. But I think after the day and after hearing from Canon Adrienne, coming up shortly, I think we're probably going to change our mind. But from your experience, does it really matter what the group size is? Do you think it's more beneficial for break it up into small groups or sort of one bigger group?
We, well, the first time I took it, there were enough people signed up that they divided it up into 3 groups. So more than 6 or 8, everybody doesn't get a chance to speak.
Right.
And so it helped to break it down that way. But if you're on Zoom, you can have people from different congregations join together, and that was very fruitful. Because there are questions about, what is it like in your community? And the variety of communities kind of spices up the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And
We have
I think
Superfund sites everywhere, so we can talk about our Superfund sites.
right. And I think that's part of the beauty of all of this, right? Isn't it? Is just to get the conversation going, just get it out
Definitely.
there as a topic that we want to talk about. And it's
Sure.
not something like, oh no, not environmentally.
Yes. Yeah. It's not scary, and it's Episcopalian, and that helped too. And it was videos from other Episcopalians talking about their experience around these issues in their communities. So that was a big plus. Yeah. And the resources are wonderful, really excellent.
All right. Well, thank you so
Thank you.
much for that, Mother Helen. Perfect timing. In fact, we might be even a little bit ahead. So I should say that Father Peter DeFranco was on the schedule today, and unfortunately, he and his colleagues had a funeral, which obviously wasn't planned. So they cannot present this morning from Holy Innocents Beach Haven. So I think what I want to do now, we've all been talking a long time, is really just to give you all a chance to chat. What we're going to do is break up into groups of 4, I think would be a good number, and really just have a discussion. And ideally that discussion will be about, how can your parish do more for CreationCare? I mean, have you thought of anything you've heard already this morning or other ideas that you may have? Because it is, it's often things you can do are often very specific to your site and your congregation and your particular situation. And so I'd like just to have that discussion. So we have people from different parishes talking to each other. And we'll give ourselves a little bit of time for that. At least 15 minutes. And then after that, we will go into a break. And then we'll come back at 10:50. And then we've got a few more presentations. And then we've got our West Coast folks will be able to join us after 11 o'clock. So if that's good with everybody, I'm going to have an attempt here to break us up into rooms.